Let us begin today's sermon. Before we begin, let us all take a moment to remind ourselves of how extremely fortunate we are to be students of the Buddha, to be his disciples, to consider him our teacher, our master, he who is the perfect one, the supremely enlightened one, the magnificent one, the omniscient one, the undefeated one, the unvanquished one. Reminding ourselves that it is his Dhamma which shall remain the key to our salvation throughout the remainder of our journey in samsara. Let us all take a moment to pledge our allegiance to the Lord Buddha as our teacher, and let us do so by reciting the Dhirasa Vigata Mohasa stanzas, followed by which we will observe the precepts and then commence today's sermon. Dhirasa Vigata Mohasa Pabhinna Kilasa Vijita Vijayasa Anighasa Susamachittasa Buddha Silasa Sadhu Panyasa Vesantarasa Vimalasa Bhagavato Tassa Savako Hamasmi Akatanka Tusitassa Vantalokamissassa Muditassa Katasamanassa Manujassa Antima Sarirassa Narassa Anopamassa Virajassa Bhagavato Tassa Savako Hamasmi Akatanka Tusitassa Vantalokamissassa Muditassa Katasamanassa Manujassa Antima Sarirassa Narassa Anopamassa Virajassa Bhagavato Tassa Savako Hamasmi Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. To seek the refuge of the Noble Triple Gem and observe the precepts. Please be upstanding and repeat all together and after me. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Saranagamaṇaṃ sampunnaṃ, Pānātipātā vēramaṇī sikkhaپadaṃ samādhiyāmi, Adinnādānā vēramaṇī sikkhaپadaṃ samādhiyāmi, Kāmesu micchāchārā vēramaṇī sikkhaپadaṃ samādhiyāmi, Musāvādā vēramaṇī sikkhaپadaṃ samādhiyāmi, Surāmeraya majjapamā daṭṭhānā vēramaṇī sikkhaپadaṃ samādhiyāmi, Tisaraṇena saddhiṃ pañcasīlaṃ dhammaṃ sādhukaṃ surakkitaṃ kattvā appamādena sampādeta. Okay, you may all now be seated. And also before we commence today's sermon, let us all take a moment to invite the countless beings in the 10,000 world systems that is within earshot of the Lord Buddha's Dhamma. Let us offer to them this opportunity to rejoice in the merits that we are all about to generate and acquire. Let us offer to them the opportunity to listen to the teaching and to achieve their salvation, reminding ourselves that these are all sentient beings who we have been incredibly indebted to in this long journey that we have come. On countless occasions, they will have dedicated and committed themselves to the betterment of our lives, to help and support us and assist us in times of need and in despair. As today we embark on this journey of self-liberation, it is our duty and obligation to extend that gift of Dhamma to all sentient beings. And so therefore, as I now make this invitation out to all those beings, devas, brahmas, spirits, demons, and those who are capable of witnessing this meritorious deed and understanding the Buddha's teaching, I ask you all to extend that invitation out in your hearts and in your minds to all of them, to invite them to join us to witness this meritorious deed, to listen, understand and comprehend the teaching of the Buddha, and to attain the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Samanta Chakravalesu Atra Gachantu Devata Saddhammang Munirajassa Sunantu Sagga Mokkadang Dhamma Savana Kalo Ayang Bhadanta Dhamma Savana Kalo Ayang Bhadanta Dhamma Savana Kalo Ayang Bhadanta. And before we begin, let us also all take a moment to acknowledge and reflect on the fact that although today we are able to listen to the teaching of the Buddha, understand it, and enable it to change and transform our lives, we are able to embrace the Dhamma and the virtues that it instills in our minds. However, in this long journey that we have come in samsara, we have not always had this opportunity. Our associations have virtually always been with ignoble and immoral people who defiled our minds with raga, dvesha, moha, desire, aversion and delusion. Having been blinded with these taints, we may have offended, insulted, reviled and desecrated the noble triple gem, the noble ones, and the Sambuddha Shasana. Today, the actions or the results of those actions may hinder our progress in the Dhamma and make it incredibly difficult for us to remain alert, to understand, and to comprehend the Dhamma. So therefore, before we begin today's sermon, let us all take a moment to gather up humility and humbleness within our minds. Let us not be fooled by our delusions. Let us take a moment to accept that we have not always been the good and kind-hearted souls that we may be today. Throughout our existence in samsara, more times than not, we have found ourselves insulting, offending, and desecrating the noble ones. So for any thoughts, words, or actions of revile, slander, or insult that we might have directed towards the Noble Triple Gem, the Samma Sambuddhas, Pacceka Buddhas, Arahata Buddhas, Anagami, Sakrudagami, Sotapannas, be they on the path or having attained the fruits, as well as the Sambuddha Shasana, the Buddha's ministry, let us all take a moment to seek their forgiveness. And as we do so, I urge you all to make a firm determination to be watchful over your thoughts, words, and actions, such that you don't find yourselves in the situations where you insult, desecrate, or revile the noble ones ever again. And finally, let us all make a firm resolve. May through the course of this sermon, if there are any gaps that have thus far kept me from achieving the noble state of Sotapanna, such gaps in my understanding and knowledge and comprehension be resolved, be fulfilled with the Dhamma. May I be able to understand the teaching of the Buddha, to attain the state of Sotapanna, and to close the gates to the four hells once and for all. And for any among you who may have already achieved that noble state, may through the course of this sermon, you be able to fulfill the subsequent stages and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. With that resolve firmly and deep-seated in your minds and hearts, I invite you all to prepare yourselves to listen to the sermon. Okay. I believe that by now you don't need me to remind you that whenever you prepare yourselves to listen to a sermon, that distractions are the devil's curse. So whatever distractions may be looming around, just waiting to bother you and disturb you right at the moment where you're about to listen to something that changes your life like it has never done before. Make sure that those distractions are not given the opportunity to ruin your journey in samsara. So whatever those distractions may be, again I remind you to put them to a side. Phones, televisions, anything really. If it's a thing, it's a thing. If it's a person, it's a person. Both can be equally distracting. After all, it's not that they want to disturb or distract you. This is the vipakas of your karmas. When we have done such things in our journey in samsara, bothered others, disturbed others, distracted them, at the precious moments in their life where their perfect and complete attention was required for them to achieve and understand, if we might have done something at that very moment to disturb, bother or distract them, the law of cause and effect runs its course. And where the causes remain, the effect materializes. It manifests itself, and before you know it, you have just missed it. So, this is a kind and gentle reminder, as I always do, put those distractions to a side. The reason I keep on about this is because when you're at the monastery, I can ensure that you are not distracted by keeping a watchful eye over you and making sure that the environment is conducive to your practice. But however, now you're in foreign grounds. I don't know where you are, I don't know what you're doing, so I can only remind you, just make sure that you're in a place that is fit and suitable to help you gain what it is that you have been looking for throughout the journey in samsara. This is no easy feat. This is quite an arduous task. We must not take this lightly. And just because perhaps you have listened to all the sermons that have been preached ever at this monastery or by all other monks, do not take this opportunity lightly. The fact that you are here means you need this. If you're not here, then perhaps you don't need this. but now you're here. Your vipakas have driven you to be here right now. So it is now not for you to decide whether this is right for you or not right for you, because that has already been decided. As the saying goes, if something's worth doing, do it to your fullest. Otherwise, it's not worth doing at all. That is how one can achieve results, and results that they can be satisfied with. Do not be the one who one day looks back from their deathbed at their past, at all those missed moments and opportunities, and then start to lament and weep with a tearful eye. Oh, but alas, I missed my chance. I missed my opportunity. How many times did my teachers tell me? How many times did my elders tell me? How many times did my parents tell me that I should be more heedful, that I should be more careful, that I should be more mindful, more alert, more vigilant? But alas, I missed all those opportunities. I didn't take it seriously enough. I was too light-hearted with all that instruction and advice. I didn't pay attention. I was heedless. Today I just have regret and repentance and remorse. Because when that day comes, no one can come and reverse the course of action so that you can make a better choice. The time to make a better choice is not then, it's not yesterday, it's today, it's right now. This is the time to make a better choice. You have a choice to make now. Always. That is always the case, no matter what you do. Now is the time to make the better choice. Make the better choice so that you don't regret. Make the better choice so that you don't repent. Make the choice so that you can die peacefully. After all, we're all going to die. The choice you make now will determine whether your death is a peaceful one or not. So the long and the short of that is put aside any distractions and make sure you keep your focus throughout the sermon. Don't disturb anyone else. Don't distract anyone else. There may be others with you, perhaps all sat around your laptop or your computer or your TV. But each one is an individual now. You're not a family for the duration of this sermon. You are yourself. That's it. There's no two of you, there's just one of you. There's one of you and there's Swami Mahansa. I want you to mentally visualize this, and then it will become so much easier to do this. I also believe that you took the time to excuse me, go back and listen to last week's sermon. I certainly did, and it was quite an eye-opener for me also. So today we will continue from where we left off. We were trying to, last week what we discussed was, when we talk about the Four Noble Truths, why are they called the truths? What is it about it that is the truth? We talked about why the Four Noble Truths were ever proclaimed by the Buddha. Why was it that when people came to ask him, where do I find the self? His response to that was, you're asking the wrong question. We talked about all of this, and how so skillfully and how witfully he diverted them to asking the right question. And when the right question was asked, the series of questions that followed took them to the root of the problem, where ultimately they were faced with a shameful truth, and the truth being that the way you feel because of ignorance. If not for ignorance, you wouldn't be feeling the way you feel. If not for ignorance, you wouldn't be sensing what you're sensing. Or at least you wouldn't think that what you're sensing is what you think you're sensing. You remember the riddle from week before last. What you feel really does not exist. What really does exist, you cannot feel. So this is what we discussed in detail last week. Now this is a series of discussions, so as I say, if you haven't listened to the first second of the series, then you will struggle to follow this discourse. So this is why it's important that you keep on track, and even perhaps if you're unable to join these sermons as they are being streamed live, it's important that you go back and listen to the recordings, which are made available promptly on YouTube and our websites and so on. If you remember, we started a long way back by trying to establish where the self was. We established that it cannot be in the body. We then started to look at the mind, and then through an experiment, an empirical experiment, excuse me, we asked ourselves, whatever I feel as being present in the present moment, is that a what or is that a who? This is the question we asked of ourselves. And we agreed that it's difficult at first attempt to consider that what we are sensing is a what. Rather, we feel quite naturally that it's a who. It's a person, it's an entity. A living, breathing entity. So then we cast our minds back into the past. The farthest memory that we could recall. For instance, when you were 6 or 7 years of age, maybe, or perhaps for some of you, you can go even farther back. And you recall that there was someone there who experienced the environment that was present then. So this is a reminder from last week. You remember your childhood memories, but never do you feel that there was someone else. You'll always feel, even as you say it, I, when I was 6 years of age, did this, that and the other. You don't feel like you have to fool yourself to think that it was the same person. Because it comes quite naturally to you that it was the same person. I was there then as the same I that's here now. And then when you cast your mind into the future and you visualize a future event, yet again, you don't feel like that's another person that may do it in the future. So you don't need to fool yourself to think that that's the same person. It just comes so naturally. That is the same me. That's the same person. So this is what we sense. This is what we feel. But the premise of last week and the previous week's discussion was, we were trying to establish how come then what we are sensing does not exist. What we feel does not exist. So this I that I feel existed in the past, in the present, and will exist in the future. Remember we talked about I am, I was and I will be. While the am, was and will be changed, the I remained. Well into the future. And you'll even say, when I die, now you're talking about a point in the future. You're talking about the last moment where you feel that you will be able to sense yourself in the way you feel just right now. However, you will also then say, after I die, I'll be reborn. And you might say, I will be reborn as a Deva. So you're even talking between rebirth cycles. In my last birth, you might say, 500 births ago, I was a monkey, you might say. 250 births from now, I will be a merchant, or a sailor, or a Deva, or a Brahman. So throughout this transmigrational process, there seems to be one variable, that is the outfit that goes on the I, but there seems to be one thing that is fixed, that is the I. Just like a man would change his outfits, walking up to the wardrobe, opening it, and trying on different items of clothing, just as a man would do so, you feel that you travel in this journey in samsara. So whatever you were 500 births ago, whatever you will be 500 births into the future, and all the time in between. Of course, 500 there is an arbitrary number. Infinitely vast journey in samsara. An infinitely long journey into the past and an infinitely long journey into the future and the present moment. The variable seems to be the outfit. And by the outfit I mean the things you're doing, the way you look, the how you do it. After all, it's what you see, what you smell, what you taste, what you feel, what you think. It's these things that keeps changing. So those are the variables. But there seems to be one fixed entity, and that entity is what we are trying to understand. It's what they tried to understand, those Brahmins in the time of the Buddha. That's when they went and asked the Buddha, where do we find this entity? What is it made up of? So you can see how, why it became necessary for people to talk about impermanence. Because what became obvious to people was that there was a permanent something. There was a permanent entity. When we talk about anicca, we are talking about the nature of something that really exists. When people talk about impermanence, they're talking about the nature of something that does not exist. Try and see if you can understand that. Then you will realize why to give an interpretation of impermanence simply does not cut it. It's not talking about the elephant in the room. So the Brahmins in the day, back in the day, and just as you feel today, feel that there was something that is permanent. There was something permanent in the past. It's the same thing, the same entity. Right? This is the person that you feel. We talked about Sam, remember? Excuse me. So when we talked about Sam felt like he was Sam when he was younger. Sam feels Sam today. Sam feels that he's Sam in the future, or he will be. And the same goes for you, all of you, for all of us. Right? So we feel that there's a something that is present, there's a something that was present, there's a something that will be present. Across these three time periods, the something doesn't change, the something that we feel present doesn't change, it's the environment that changes. So that includes the things that this something sees, something smells, or you can call it the someone for the time being. The someone sees, someone smells. Is everything on the outside. Taste, touch, right? And the thoughts that pass through the someone's mind. So these are all external factors. While that is changing, the someone that experiences that remains put. It's almost like when you're watching a movie. If you sit down to watch, in the cinema, if you sit down to watch a movie and the reel starts playing, you can see motion. So they're motion pictures. You can see the pictures moving in motion. You stay put. So in relation to you, the rest of the world keeps changing. And when that changes, you feel that you're going through a journey. Isn't that so? You feel like you're going through a journey. When you watch a movie, there's the start of it. Then they work their way through to the climax, and then the finale. So you're going on a journey, but you're not going anywhere. You're put. You're staying put. So what's changing is what's coming through your five senses, right? You have remained put, but what's going through your five senses have changed through the course of the duration of that movie. And you, at the end of the movie, you'll come and say, that was a wonderful movie, lovely story that was, you might say. But you didn't go anywhere. You stayed put, and the story unfolded in front of your eyes. So in relation to you, this is what you sense as being present. In relation to you, the outside world is changing. And the same concept applies, folks. When we talk about the self, in relation to the self, the outside world is changing. That is why we talk about my experiences. When you talk about my experiences, say you've just been on holiday. You go somewhere, you come back, and then your friends ask you, how did it go? What did you do? What did you get up to? Then you'll start talking about, so it was a lovely flight from the airport, and then we got off wherever. And then as soon as we got off the airport, this thing, that thing happened. And we were greeted in a very welcoming way. and then we got escorted to the hotel we were staying at, and then we got great treatment there, and then we went on a safari, we went bird watching, then we went swimming, and then we went canoeing, we then did some whale watching. Now you'll just go on talking about all these experiences you had, right? All the way to when you returned, and to this moment where you're actually relating your experiences. What happened? Now, you see, when you relate the story, it's all the things on the outside that keeps changing. But the point of reference, that is the self, remains put. So in relation to me, all these things are happening around me. I want you to visualize what I'm trying to explain to you. I really want you to visualize here. So you'll be able to understand what I'm trying to say. Remember, I'm struggling here because I can't give you body language. So only 25% of this communication is really coming to you. 75% drops on this side of the laptop screen. The wires can't carry that across to you. So you got to be interactive. You got to try and put 100% into this. Otherwise, you won't get it. So as you're relating your experiences, you're staying put. I don't mean physically you're staying in one place. I'm talking about the way you relate your experience. I mean, of course, you're going to be sat down somewhere, you're standing with your friends and you're talking. I'm not talking about staying put in that sense. I don't mean, you're not explaining it while you're walking. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about as you relate your experience, whether that is you're standing, you're walking, you're sleep, it doesn't matter. Whatever physical stance you're in, that does not matter here. What I'm talking about is as you relate your experience, are you not talking about a world outside of you that kept changing while the reference point that was you stayed fixed? Of course, you will say, I went canoeing. So the went canoeing is the bit that changed from went bird watching. But the I remained intact. That didn't change. That's how you can have good days and bad days. Yesterday I had a good day. The day before wasn't so good. It was a bad day. So there was the I, and then there was a good day, and then there was a bad day. So you see, now we are beginning to, in that frame of reference, we have something that is permanent and we have something that is impermanent. From that frame of mind, or from that frame of reference. Or just think about, say you went to the aquarium. So you got yourself a ticket and now you're walking through the corridors. You're looking at the fish on either side. Right? So as you walk along the corridor, again, I'm not talking about you physically walking. That's not the being fixed or in being mobile I'm talking about here, right? I'm talking about when you now relate your experience, you say, I can see turtles. I can now see catfish. I can now see goldfish. Right? Now you're talking about the I remains permanent. The can sees keep changing. Right? So when you are the reference point, the world outside you is impermanent. But isn't the reference point permanent? So this is where the permanent-impermanent conversation comes into the picture. I tell you folks, the Dhamma is flowing through my mind at a rate of 1,000 miles per hour, and I'm trying to slow it down and turn it into words so that you can understand these things, and we'll keep trying. All you got to do is pay attention. Don't let the sleep mark catch you. Stay awake, stay alert, and put your full focus on this. That's why I said, put aside distractions. Don't let anyone distract you right now. Don't let anything distract you right now. It's not worth it. Because this is your salvation we are talking about. If you understand this, you will never ask the question. Swami Namaste said, Anicca or Anitya. You won't need to ask that question again. Because the fact of the matter is, when we talk about impermanence, which is a characteristic that we have to, people talk about impermanence, right? All day long, people talk about it's not permanent, it's impermanent. People talk about this, right? In the name of the Buddha's Dhamma, they talk about it. It's not impermanent, or rather, it's not permanent, it's impermanent. So, what I'm trying to get you to think about here, folks, is what do people think is permanent? It's not the outside world that people think is permanent. I mean, that's a given. Everyone gets that. It's not permanent. The outside world is not permanent. No one in a sane mind will say that the flower that's blooming today is not going to wither away tomorrow. You don't need to be a student of the Buddha's Dhamma to understand that. Everyone gets that. That there's no such thing as there's no such thing that is permanent. There's nothing that is permanent in the outside world. However, anyone who has not listened to the Buddha's Dhamma will sense something that is permanent. That's what I'm talking about. And it's not the outside world. It's the point of reference. There's a permanent point of reference. Or at least there seems to be a permanent point of reference. There isn't one really. But it feels like there's a permanent point of reference. And that is this self. I would say you are listening to I'm trying to give you as many examples as possible so you can make sense of this. This is very subtle. This is why you need to pay attention. But you can get this. If I can get this, anyone can get it. I promise you that. If I can understand it, anyone can understand it. Say you're listening to a song. Now the song starts, and there's usually an intro. right? Then you'll start to pick up on the melodies. Then there'll probably be the chorus. Usually is. Right? You'll also be able to, if you've got a good ear, you'll be able to pick out the various instruments that are being played. You'll be able to sense the mood that's in the rhythm. From the rhythm, you'll be able to sense the kind of mood. You'll be able to tell what kind of genre it is. Is it classical? Is it hip-hop? Blues? And so on. Romance? Right? You'll be able to sense, oh, is it horror? With the devil's note and all that. You'll be able to pick up on those things. So, if at the end of this, at the end of listening to this song, I ask you to give me a review. What's your take on it? What did you feel? What did you sense throughout the duration of listening to that song? You'll be able to relate your experience. You'll talk about the song. You'll talk about what you experienced. You'll say it started off very upbeat, but towards the middle of it, it was so-so. I didn't feel like I was being carried away. But then towards the end of that song, I really liked how there was that crescendo. I really enjoyed that. That sounded really nice. And that harmonium at the end, that was all very nice, you might say. Right? So again, I'm trying to talk to you as a musician in your language. Before I talk to you as the moviegoer in your language. And I'm trying to help you understand this in whichever way possible. Or going to the aquarium and, whatever kind of person you are, you can find some experience to which you can relate this. Essentially, what I want you to understand here is, even as you listen to that song there, and you're now relating your experience, there's something that is permanent, there's something that is impermanent. Don't you see that? What's impermanent is all those things that are going on around you. How what you were hearing, what you were listening to kept changing. But who's experiencing this? There's the observer, right? Not the newspaper. I mean you. You're the observer. So you're observing what's going on out there. So you, the point of reference, is fixed. Everything that's going on outside, that is not fixed. That keeps changing. So now you see there's something permanent and there's something impermanent. Do you not sense that there's something permanent? Even before you started listening to these sermons, right? Our sermons at the monastery and Lokuhamru's sermons, right? The sermons that we used to listen to growing up and the Dhamma that we came across, we learnt about permanence and impermanence. And oftentimes, we were grappled with the problem of, why do we need to be told that this is impermanent? I can see that it's impermanent. Did you never have that problem? People say life is impermanent. Well, duh. People seem to be dying all day long. So you don't need to be telling me that it's impermanent. I can see it's impermanent. Yes. Fruits fall off trees. Right? People grow old. People die. People get ill, and then they get cured, and then they become ill again. You throw something up, it's going to come down. It's going to fall back on the ground. Everywhere you look, all you see is impermanence, and then you need to be told that the world is impermanent? So I struggled with this. My point was, why are you telling me the obvious? The Buddha could not have come into this world to tell me the obvious. This is where this was the grappling problem for me. As I began to learn the Dhamma, people started telling me that everything's impermanent. Yeah, tell me something I don't know. I don't need to go to Dhamma school for people to tell me that everything's impermanent. It's obvious. The only way I could have gone to Dhamma school was because the world is impermanent. If I had stayed at home, and it takes me 2 hours to get to Dhamma school, 2 hours later I should still be at home if everything is permanent. So the fact that I'm in the Dhamma school listening to what you're teaching me right now, sir, tells me that the world is impermanent. You don't need to be teaching me that. The fact that I can listen to every word you say, I can make out what you're trying to say. I can listen. I hear different words. I hear different syllables. I can hear the modulation of your voice. All of this is solid evidence to me that the world is impermanent. You don't need to tell me that the world is impermanent, right? Did you all not struggle with this problem? Something tells me that is one reason why Buddhism got undermined so much. Stating the obvious. You don't need to teach your grandma to suck eggs. But the point was, that is not what people who were talking about impermanence really should have talked about. Because the reason that you need to say that something's impermanent, the reason that you need to teach someone that something's impermanent is when they think it's permanent, right? Yes or no? You got to tell someone, no, Puta, it's impermanent, if prior to you saying that, their understanding of that which is the subject here is permanent. The problem here, if it's beginning to unravel for you, is it's not the outside world that we need to be talking about impermanent. It's the point of reference. This point of reference is that self. So that which you feel exists, this I that is present, the I am, I'm not saying that impermanence is the right interpretation of anicca. That's not what I'm saying. Even to be teaching you that something's impermanent, we are still talking about something that does not exist. Whereas anicca does not talk about something that does not exist. Anicca talks about something that does exist. It's something like, let's say you're at home and you don't have a pet dog. So you don't have a dog, okay? You're at home and you don't have a dog. To be telling you that the dog that you don't have, his name is not Tommy, it's Jerry. It's a lie about a lie. I don't know how much you're getting what I'm trying to put through to you, but I'm trying. Or believe you me, I'm trying here. So you don't have a dog. Okay, you don't have a dog. And I'm telling you now, his name is not Tommy, it's Jerry. Are you ready to accept the dog that you don't have? His name is not Tommy, it's Jerry. To tell you that the world is impermanent is the same. The self does not exist. The self that does not exist is not permanent. Like what? Should be the response that comes in your mind. First things first. When we talk about, I say we, I say they, right? When the people who talk about permanence and impermanence, right? When they talk about permanence, it's not about the outside world. Right? So first get that out of your minds. It's not about the outside world. So give up on this battle about, yeah, but it's obvious, is it not? I mean, we understand, that's not what they're talking about. So let it go. So you can give up on that debate of, but is it, yes, we understand it's not permanent, right? Everything's impermanent. Why do you need to be telling us that it's impermanent? That's not what they're talking about. They're not talking about the outside world. Because everyone gets that it's impermanent. I mean, Tommy gets that. When you give it to eat, the dog you don't have, when you give it to eat and it's finished eating, it realizes there's no more food. So it realizes that the world is impermanent. So you don't need the Buddha's Dhamma to teach you that, right? So that's not what they're talking about. It's not about the outside world. What they're talking about is the point of reference, the self, the I that is am. The I that is am, they're saying, is not permanent. That it's ever changing. It's impermanent. That's like saying the dog you don't have, his name's not Tommy, it's Jerry. Shall I tell you more things about the dog that you don't have? Would you like to listen? Why don't you all gather around? And I'll tell you all the things about the dog you don't have. So his name's not Tommy, we know that, right? It's Jerry. Right? The dog you don't have is 4 years old. How about that? Who's this? Jerry. Where's Jerry? There's no Jerry. Why? Don't have that dog. And Jerry's favorite food is pizza. Whose favorite food is pizza? Jerry's. Where's Jerry? We don't have a Jerry. Okay, so the dog you don't have, his favorite food is pizza. Are you going to go get some pizza now? Why not? What? Because Jerry's not there? But it's his favorite food. You can't be so unkind. Jerry's favorite food is pizza. So how about we go get some pizza for him? Yeah, but that's his favorite food though. You're telling me he doesn't exist? Yeah, but okay, but that's his favorite food though. Let's go get him some pizza. No? You're still here. You haven't gone out to get pizza. Why? Because Jerry does not exist. So for me to be telling you, his name's not Tommy, it's Jerry, there has to be a dog in the first place, right? There has to be a dog in the first place for me to be telling you, his name is this is how old he is, this is what he likes to eat, this is where he likes to sleep, this is what he likes to do. Right? You get that, don't you know? To talk to you about a dog that does not exist is nonsensical. Now the same goes. When I tell you, if I were to tell you even, that the self that does not exist is impermanent, how much sense does that make? We're talking about a fairy tale here now, because we're talking about something that really does not exist. In the same breath that I tell you that this self is impermanent, I can talk to you about Pinocchio and what he likes to eat and where he lives and which school he goes to. Why? Just as much as Pinocchio is a fairy tale, this self that you feel, that you experience, that you sense, that is also a fairy tale. It is not something that exists. But of course, yes, you sense it. I get that. Yep. I know. So what is it that we sense? That is what we talked about this, but this is what we are coming to. It's not the self, but you do experience it, you do sense it. But are we all agreeing, before we move on, that it makes no sense to tell you that something that does not exist is impermanent? If anything, I should be telling you that something's permanent if it existed, right? If something exists, then yes, I can tell you it's a permanent or it's an impermanent thing. But if something does not exist, why bother? So, you see, to give the interpretation that anicca is impermanence, if you ask me, that's a complete mockery. Because the Buddha did not come into this world to talk about something that does not exist. Come on, he's got better things to be doing. He talked about the truth. And he talked about 4 of them. He did not talk about what does not exist. impermanence relates to something that does not exist. That's why he didn't talk about it. He talked about something that does exist. That is what he proclaimed as the first truth of suffering. He did not say, I expound to you the first noble truth of self. He said, this is the first noble truth of suffering. What you are sensing, that is suffering. It's not a self. And when he starts to talk about suffering, what is the point of talking about suffering in terms of whether it's permanent or impermanent? Which one would you like? Would you like suffering if it's permanent, or would you like suffering if it's impermanent? The Buddha doesn't talk about a suffering whether it's permanent or impermanent. The Buddha talks about the cause of suffering. He did not come here to waste his time, folks. He did not come here, most of all, to waste your time, talking about things that don't exist. That's a lie about a lie. Anything that is said about something that does not exist, or anything that is said about a lie is also a lie, is it not? How can anything that is said about a lie be a truth? Because you're talking about a lie. I don't have a dog. Okay, that's the truth. His name is Tommy, or his name is Jerry. That's a lie. Why? Because now you're talking about a dog that does not exist. So when you say my dog's name is Jerry, you're also saying that I have a dog. That is a lie. And then to say his name is Jerry, that's another lie. He likes to eat pizza, that's another lie. He's 3 years of age, that's another lie. No matter what you say about the dog that does not exist, it's a lie. The Buddha did not say, I proclaim to you the first noble lie of suffering. He did not proclaim that which is false. He proclaimed that which is true, the first noble truth of suffering. It makes little sense then to dwell on whether it's permanent or impermanent. I'll answer that question for you if you can tell me the name of the dog that I don't have. So I, as a monk, I don't keep dogs. Tell me what its name is. Tell me my dog's name, and I will tell you whether it's permanent or impermanent. Right, so next time you come and ask me, Swaminatha, is it permanent or impermanent? What's my dog's name? You answer this question, I'll answer that question. Then you'll say, but Swaminatha, you don't have a dog. Well, yeah, you don't have a self to be saying whether it's permanent or impermanent. What do you have then? The first noble truth of suffering. See, now we are getting somewhere. So you must understand then, to give an interpretation of impermanence to anicca, that's meaningless. That's child play. Then you must also understand why, using that interpretation, by following through with that interpretation, you cannot achieve your liberation. Nibbana cannot be attained that way. Talking about something that does not exist, how can you attain Nibbana? Then when are you going to talk about the thing that does exist? If all your life you're talking about something that does not exist and how you can tackle it and how you can get rid of it, it does not exist in the first place. You want to talk about how to get rid of it? So how about we talk about something that does not exist and the reason it does not exist and how to get rid of the thing that does not exist and the path to getting rid of something that does not exist. What? That's Nibbana? Do understand that the Buddha came here to talk about that which does exist. That's why he said it's the truth. Or everything else you're thinking about is all false. That is what he implied. Here's the truth. Does that not imply everything else is false? You need to understand this is the Buddha, right? So he's got ways of expressing things. He didn't go around saying you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, and also you're also wrong. What he said was, here's the truth. What does that imply? The first noble truth of suffering. But Swamina, so what we do sense that I'm here. Yes, I understand. That's the very question they had, the same problem they had when they met the Buddha. What is this, Venerable Gautama? What is this I sense? What is this I that I sense? I sense that I exist. Talk to me about that. Tell me, explain to me, what is that I experience? What is that I sense? And the Buddha says, the first noble truth of suffering. So does he not tell you then what that is? On one occasion the Buddha says, Yadaniccan tan dukkam. Yan dukkam tadanatta. If the world, or if all things that are conditional, or if all things are conditional, they have the nature of arising and passing away, this, my dear man, that you experience is dukkha. That is what he meant. Yadaniccan tan dukkam. What flows through the mind are Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara and Vijnana. And they, by their very nature, are anicca. They are conditional. They arise and pass away. So, yadanicca. They are conditional. You can also take that as being vexatious. Yadanicca. They're vexatious. What's they? Everything that passes through the mind is vexatious. Everything. Yes, but then what is it I sense in my mind, Venerable Gautama? Tandukkha. Did you get that? Everything that passes through the mind is vexatious. They are conditional. They arise and pass away. They're not constant. Aniccang, adduvaṃ, aññatam, viparināma dhamma. That is their nature. They are conditional. They're not fixed. They're constantly in flux. And they are prone to decay. That is what is meant by aniccang, adduvaṃ, aññatam, viparināma dhamma. Just think about it. This self that you experienced, the self that you sensed, did you ever feel like it passed away? Did you ever feel like it was inclined to passing away? No, the I feels young as ever. You don't feel like the I has aged. When you think to yourself, you're old, okay, what are you basing this on? What factors are you basing this information on? More than likely, you're going by what you see in the mirror. Because, clearly, just because you're 70 years of age cannot be the reason that you feel old. Why do I say that? Do you remember the time when you were a Deva and your lifespan was 70 million years? How did you feel at the age of 70? Old? You get my drift? You didn't feel old at the age of 70. You didn't feel old at the age of 5 million. At the age of 20 million, you were just about starting to make sense of what's going on around you. You didn't feel old. Come on. Probably 50, 55 million. You started to think like, I should probably start making funeral arrangements. But you still had about 15 million years to go. Right? So, you can't tell me that just because you're 70 years of age, in other words, you have lived on this earth for 70 years, as in your mind has arisen and passed away over the last 70 years, cannot be the reason you feel old. You feel old because of what you're seeing in the mirror. And your body, your physical body, does not respond to your commands and orders and wishes like it used to. So again, we are talking about the physical aspect of aging, and aches and pains that you didn't used to have. You are slower than you used to be. So, the self that you sense, which I agree, you sense that, yeah. You sense something, you think it's self. So really the self is a misidentification of that which you sense. It's distorted sanya. Viparita sanya. That is the self. Because the truth is, it's suffering. So coming back to what I was trying to talk to you there, have you ever felt that the self that you sense is anicca, adduva, anyata, and viparinama? Did you ever feel that they had those characteristics? Did you ever feel that your self was arising and passing away? No, clearly not. We tested that a moment ago, didn't we? At the age of 6, at the age of 36, at the age of 56, I feel like I'm the same person. I haven't changed. It's just the experiences around me, they changed. I didn't change. Yeah, the way I think, that has changed. Again, the way I think has changed. I remain the same. You can say the same about everything. The way I walk has changed. The way I talk has changed, right? The way I eat has changed. You don't eat now like you did when you were 6 years of age. Your mother doesn't have to run after you now, right? At the age of 36? Hope not. Right? So the way I think has changed, yes. The way I see, the way I smell, the way I feel, the way I taste, the way I touch, the way I do, all these things have changed. And the way I think has changed, yeah. While all that changed, those were the variables, what has remained constant? And what is that, Venerable Gautama? Yan dukkha. Tan dukkha. Yadaniccam. Tan dukkha. That is suffering. Because whatever you sense in your mind has to be the product of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. If it's real, it has to be that. If it's not real, then it has to be the product of ignorance and attachment. So the entities that really do exist in this world, which are the five aggregates, the Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, they by their very nature are anicca, addu, anyata, viparinama dhamma. They arise and pass away, they are conditional, they are not fixed, they are in a state of constant flux, and they are inclined towards decay. Have you ever felt that the self that you feel right now bear those characteristics? That they are inclined to passing away? That it's in constant flux? That it's not fixed? That it's arising and passing away? No, clearly not. That felt like a constant stream. 6, 36, 56, time changed, time passed by, outfits changed, but I remain the same. So it cannot be a product of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. Why? Because if it were a product of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, then it has to bear the characteristics of its constituent components. The characteristic of Rupa is Anicca, Addu, Anyata, Viparinama Dhamma. Is the self like that? Do you ever feel like you are Anicca, Addu, Anyata, Viparinama Dhamma? Ever felt that way? The characteristic of Vedana is Anicca, Addu, Anyata, Viparinama Dhamma. Have you ever felt that the self that you sense is like that? The characteristic of Sanya is Anicca, Addu, Anyata, Viparinama Dhamma. Arises and passes away, not fixed, in a state of constant flux, and prone to decay. Have you ever felt that you are like that? No, then clearly you cannot be made out of Sanya. This self that you sense cannot be made out of Sanya, because you do not bear any of the characteristics of the constituent aggregates, or of the aggregates. The nature of Sankara, the nature of Vijnana are the same. Anicca, Addu, Anyata, Viparinama Dhamma. You know, if you make a dessert, right, a pudding, and if you add sugar to it, it has got to taste sweet. It may be that you add other ingredients to it, right, but the end product will contain at least a tiniest amount of sweetness. Why? Because you have added sugar to it. So when you've added sugar, if you've say added lemon, right, and you added marzipan, right? When you added all these things, and the product that comes out of it, they have to have the characteristic tastes of the things that were the ingredients. So if the self that you sense is the product, if it were the product, or rather, if it was the product of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, then the self that you sense has to bear characteristics of the components. But alas, they don't, or it doesn't. While Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana have the characteristics of Anicca, Addu, Anyata, Viparinama Dhamma, the self that you sense does not have any of these characteristics. So then tell me, can it be something that is made out of the five aggregates? Can the self that you sense be made out of the five aggregates? Can its constituent components be Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara and Vijnana? Can it? When it's very evident to us that it does not have any of those characteristics, what proof do we have to say, what evidence do we have, what grounding do we have to say that it is composed, it is comprised, it is made up of those five things? So then was the Buddha's question not the most appropriate one when he said, you are asking the wrong question? When the Brahmins went and said, where in the Rupa is the self? Is the self made out of the Rupa? Or is the self in the Rupa? Is the self on the Rupa, under the Rupa, left, right, center, middle? It's the same as asking, right? I don't have a dog. Is his name Tommy or Jerry? So the Buddha quite aptly responded with the question, you're asking the wrong question. Do you now see why that is the wrong question to be asking? I don't have something. What is it made out of? Something does not exist. What is it made of? Now, if you are any better than the Buddha, how about you try and answer that question? There's something that does not exist. What is it made out of? Come on. Okay, which day of the week is Punday? Is it the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, or seventh day of the week? Punday? Which one? Why can you not tell me? Because I'm asking the wrong question. You got to tell me that this day that you have just made up does not exist. And how do you tell me that? The reason you think that Punday exists is because you're ignorant. Isn't that way he led that conversation? He said, you're asking the wrong question. Well, what is the right question then? Ask me, why do I feel this way? Okay, why do I feel this way? What is the cause of this? Then he said, Bhava Pachya Jati. And then that series of questions continued until they struck a gold mine. Ignorance. Ask me what is the cause of Abhisankar. Okay, what is the cause of Abhisankar? Ignorance. What? You're telling me that the reason I'm asking you which day of the week is Punday is because I'm ignorant? Yes. Ignorance again is what? Sensing that something that does not exist exists, and not being able to see that which does exist. That is ignorance. What does not exist you see as exists. What exists you see as don't exist. That is ignorance. Hopefully you are beginning to sense how all this hangs so beautifully together. It has to. He was taught by the perfect one. You know, you didn't hear this from me like 6 months ago, right? And when you came to listen to the sermons, you thought that, wow, Swami knows a thing or two. And you didn't hear this from me back then, right? Now think about how much the Buddha must know that we still don't know. Am I the one to be impressed with? You know, with every passing week, I will share with you something that you'll probably not have heard before. But you must bear in mind that 2,500 years ago, the Buddha knew all of this and more. That which is yet for me to be realized, the Buddha realized. So yada nicchantam dukkham. Right? So the nature of the five aggregates, which are the things that really do exist, they do exist. They arise and pass away. They are anicca, addu, annita, viparinama dhamma. That is their nature. So clearly the self that I experience has never demonstrated these characteristics. So then it cannot be the product of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. So if it's not the product of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, what is it the product of? If you create something from something that does not exist, have you ever been to a magic show? Where a magician will pull out a pigeon out of his sleeve, pull a pigeon out of his sleeve, or he'll send a coin through his sleeve and pull it out of his mouth. And when you can't explain that, you call that magic. But anyone with half a brain cell knows that that is not real. It's fake. It's only an illusion. Because you can't pull a coin out of your mouth if you didn't have one there in the first place. You can't pull a pigeon out of your sleeve if you didn't have one there in the first place. Excuse me. So you can't pull a self out of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana if you didn't have one there in the first place. So if that's an illusion, what is this? If when you look at a magic show, you say that's an illusion, what do you call this? Clearly it's an illusion. So if this is an illusion, what is the truth? The first noble truth of suffering. This, my dear man, is suffering. Yadanichang tam dukkha. Yan dukkhang tadanatta. If this is dukkha, why are you talking about a self? Why are you talking about a self? This is dukkha. Change your language. You're talking about that which does not exist. So what exists? Tan dukkha. Why? Because yada nichya. The only thing that can exist is Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, and they by their very nature are anicca. So anything that you try to create using them, because after all you're creating it based on Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, but it's not Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. Ignorance, after all, is the wrong belief that Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana are pleasurable. Right? So based in that wrong view, attachment arises. This is because you want to construct this self that you experience. Here's another subtle point. If you don't get this, let it go. We'll talk about it later on. But this pleasurable, joyful, essence-full is not simply talking about just Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. It's also referring to the self that you experience. So what you experience as being the self, the belief there, the wrong belief, is that this self that I experience, after all, it's suffering, right? We know that now because of the Buddha's teaching. But until the Buddha taught that, the belief was that what I'm experiencing, this I that is am, is pleasurable. So if it's pleasurable, it feels good to be me, does it not? Feels good to be me? Yeah, but things happen to me which are not good. Bad things happen to me, good things happen to me, but it feels good to be me. Right? So clearly then, the self that you experience, I'm going to have to talk about self because otherwise I'll have to say the suffering that you experience, that is in real terms. But now I'm still talking about the delusion. The self-illusion, the belief that we used to have or have before the teaching, before we got to understand the Dhamma, is that it's pleasurable, joyful and essence-full. So if that is pleasurable, you want to keep building it. You want to keep it there. You want to keep experiencing it. Because something that is pleasurable, you want to keep experiencing. You don't want to throw out something that hasn't gone bad. Right? If it's good, you want to keep it. So the self that you experience is good, it's pleasurable. So therefore you want to keep it. So to keep it, you got to keep making it. Because here's the thing, although you didn't feel that the self or rather, although you felt that the self was constant, that which happens in the background to keep this self evident, that happens constantly. That has to keep on happening because it passes away. So it has to keep on happening. So this is why we need abhisankara. So abhisankara is performed to continuously produce that which is pleasurable. Right? We understand that. That is what abhisankara is. The relief from vexation, yeah. I'm asking you to look at it from a slightly different angle. Abhisankara is the activity that is carried out to keep creating, generating and producing that which is pleasurable. So if your belief is that the self is what is pleasurable, this self that you sense within yourself, the I that is pleasurable, then abhisankara is used to create that I, to create that self. So to create that self, you got to make use of whatever is available to you. You can only make something with the ingredients you have to hand. So to create the self, you have to make use of the ingredients available to you. And the ingredients which are available to you are Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. So to create the self, the I that you feel is am or present, you use the only ingredients which are available to you, which are Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara and Vijnana. But you want to create something that is nitya, pleasurable. You want to create something that is joyful, sukha. You want to create something that continues to give you the feeling, the sense of a self, atta. Because that is what you sense right now, that I am. So you want to continue to create something that gives you the feeling of, or the sense of I am, I continue to be. So nitya sukha atta is what you want to create. However, to create that, the building blocks you have been given, the 5 aggregates, are anicca, dukkha and anatta. by their very nature. Now, the situation you're in is akin to giving you some chocolate and asking you to make a teapot. So you have a chocolate teapot. What good is a chocolate teapot? Because if you want a teapot, you want something you can put tea in. You got to put, so tea is something that is hot. So the container has to be something that is capable of withstanding high temperatures. Unlike chocolate. I use chocolate teapot because that's a common expression. So if you've been given chocolate to make a teapot, you know that what you make, you might make a teapot out of it, but it's going to be of no use to someone who's in need of a teapot. You can't use it for the purpose you designed to build it. You designed and built it. So likewise, you wanted something that was niche, something that was pleasurable and joyful, and something that would continue to give you the sense, the perception of I am. However, what you have been presented with, the building blocks you have been given are Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana, and they by their nature are Anicca, Dukkha and Anatta. In other words, they are vexatious. They do not have the ability, not that they've got anything against you, they just don't have the ability to give you, you can't make something that is pleasurable out of Rupa. You can't make something pleasurable, something joyful out of Rupa. You can't make something that gives you the impression, the sense of a self out of Rupa, because they don't have those characteristics. So a chocolate teapot. But you're ignorant. What did the Buddha say ignorance was? Dukkhe ajnana. What did he mean by that? As I say, the Dhamma is flowing at 1,000,000 miles an hour now, and I'm trying to slow it down so that it can make sense to those of you who are listening to this. What did the Buddha say? Dukkhe ajnana. What he meant by that is this that which you create is dukkha. Not knowing that is ignorance. That which you sense, this is dukkha. This is suffering. What you're sensing right now is suffering. And rightly so, because what did you use to make it? Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. What are they by their nature? Sufferable. Why? Because they arise and pass away. So the moment you attach yourself to it, fear and grief. Can you see how everything hangs together so beautifully? So that which is being created right now, by using Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, which are the only building blocks available to you, you don't have any other elements. The mind does not have access to any other elements because no other elements exist. So the only elements which do exist, the five aggregates, are by their very nature vexatious, sufferable, and essenceless. So the essence of the self, that cannot be created out of it, that cannot be molded out of it. But because of ignorance, it doesn't stop you from trying. And that attempt is called abhisankara. Why? Dukkha ajnana. You're ignorant about the fact that whatever you try to create now with these building blocks can only be suffering. Because of that ignorance, what you try and do now is to go ahead and try and make this self that you experience, that you sense out of the building blocks that are available to you. So you try to make that which is impossible to be made. Your attempt to make something that is impossible to be made. But you don't give up. Why? Dukkha ajnana. You have not realized that if I only attempt to make anything out of these five aggregates, it can only be suffering because their very nature is sufferable and vexatious. So whatever I try to make with these five elements has to be vexation. It has to be suffering. It has to be. It cannot be anything else. It has to be that. But because of ignorance, you go ahead. And that going ahead and attempting, that is abhisankara. So is it any wonder then that the Buddha says, etang santang, etam panitam, yadidang sabba sankara samato. What is beautiful? What is peaceful? Is to stop trying to do that which is impossible. What's impossible? To create that which you feel is the self by using the Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, because they don't have the characteristics that should be present in the elements that you use to make that which you are trying to make. But if you only as much as try to make something out of it, something will be made. Excuse me. If you try to make something, because Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara have no idea that you are trying to make a self out of them, so they'll come along quite happily. they'll come along quite happily. If you try to make anything out of them, the only thing that will be made is suffering. So any abhisankara again is the bringing together of the five aggregates and trying to create something new. The result of abhisankara will always be dukkha. So who is an arahant? An arahant is someone who has perfected the knowledge that dukkha jnana. He has understood yadanichantam dukkha. He has understood that the rupa vedana sanya sankara vijnana are characteristically vexatious and sufferable and essenceless. Knowing that, excuse me, knowing that, he no longer attempts the futile task of trying to make a self. Was a self ever made? No, it was never made. It was never made. It was never made, you must understand that. What was made was suffering. But after suffering was made, ignorance, which is dukkha ajnanam, as in not understanding that that which has been made is suffering, thinks that this is pleasure, that this is joyful, essential, pleasurable. That's what I said a moment ago. Pleasurable, joyful and essential is not only about the rupa vedana sanya sankara vijnana, but also that which you sense, the eye that you sense. To think that that's pleasurable, joyful and essential, that is dukkha ajnana. So is it any wonder then, when one becomes a sotapanna, sakkaya ditthi goes away forever? The view that that which is being created is pleasurable, joyful and essential, that's gone. So the Sotapanna understands this is not a technical understanding. They understand wholeheartedly that this which is being created is suffering, dukkha jnana. And that's what the Buddha says, idam dukkham pubbe ananasutesu dhammesu chakkung udapadi jnanam udapadi panya udapadi vidya udapadi aloko udapadi. I have understood, I have been awakened, I have realized, I have seen that this which has been created within me, that point of reference, that has always been suffering. I used to think that that was pleasure, that was joy. So therefore I tried to continue to make that, using the only ingredients that were available to me. But little did I realize that the only things that could be made from things that were vexatious, sufferable and essenceless have to be vexatious, sufferable, or rather vexation, suffering, and something that is essenceless. That I had not understood up until now. Pubbe ananasutesu dhammesu. But chakkung udapadi now. Jnanam udapadi. And on the other occasion he says, dukkha ajnana. Now he says, jnanang udapadi. I have been awakened. Or I have awakened. Panya udapadi. Through wisdom. This is wisdom. So we've been talking about existence in itself is suffering. Remember we used to talk about being happy is a paradox. Because you can't be and happy at the same time. Because being in itself is suffering. I'm telling you folks, every sermon that was preached up until now, we've always been talking about the same thing. If you have been a good student, you would have walked the path along with your teacher. So when the teacher completes his journey, no soon after do you as a good student would complete your journey. But for that you have to be a good student. I can't be a good student for you. You can't be and happy at the same time. We talked about this before. Do you not remember? Excuse me. Being is suffering after all. I am. That is the suffering. And then the Buddha goes on to explain, so if this is suffering, as in, this that is being created, if that is suffering, if the I that is am, that is the suffering, what is the cause of it? That is the second noble truth of suffering. Not of self, of suffering. The second noble truth of suffering. Attachment is the cause of suffering. Attachment to what? Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Viññāna. Now you must understand why attachment is the cause of suffering. That is what we have been explaining to you throughout this sermon. Now all of this should start to make sense to you folks. Why is attachment the cause of suffering? Because what is attachment after all? This is using Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Viññāna to create that which does not exist. To create which that cannot be created. Because Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Viññāna do not have the characteristics of Nitya, Sukha and Atta. What you are trying to create cannot be created with the five aggregates. But because of ignorance, attachment follows, and through attachment, you're attached to, you attach yourself to So you can almost visualize you're extending your arm to grab rupa. Think of that as like attachment. You're extending yourself to grab rupa. Vedana, sanya, sankara and vijnana. You're trying to make something that is nicha. Is that possible? You're trying to make a chocolate teapot. You're trying to do the impossible. Because if something is anicca, then that which is created out of it has to be dukkha. Yadaniccan tan dukkha. It cannot be this self that you feel is nicca. Yan dukkhan tadanatta. Netang mama. Meso hamasmi. Nameso attati. So why do you talk about a self? Why do you talk about my and self? Why do you talk about myself? Evametang yatha bhutang sammappaññāya dattappa. Seeing the true nature. Yatha bhuta. Yatha is true. Seeing the true nature of rupa vedana sanya sankara vijnana. Sammappaññāya. Right view through right view and wisdom. Having shed ignorance and attachment. Samma paññāya. Samma paññāya. Dattabba. That is how you hold, how you bear it now. Once you've seen it, that is how you bear it now. And when you do so, etam santang etam panitam. Now it's beautiful. Now it's peaceful. Why? Sabba sankhara samato. All sankharas that were done to create the self, this illusion, sabba sankhara samato, have been put to rest. Having realized that what you were trying to do was impossible, you have now stopped trying to do the impossible. Trying to do the impossible, when you try to do the impossible, something happened. It's not like nothing happened. You know, it's almost like, say, you want to turn on the tap. When you turn on the tap, the worst thing that can happen, if it's that water doesn't come out of the tap, okay, fine, so we've got a problem. Water doesn't come out of the tap. But what if muddy water starts coming out of the tap? Now you've got two problems, have you not? One, clean water isn't coming out of the tap. Two, muddy water is coming out of the tap. So you see there are two problems here. Imagine you wanted to wash some clothes. You put it in a bucket, you put it under the tap, and you just open the tap. If water didn't come out of the tap, okay, fine. You know, we've got one problem. We can't wash our clothes. But now if muddy water comes out of the tap, Now, not only can you not wash your clothes, you got to wash them because it's been washed by muddy water. You got two problems there. So the same thing happens here. Not only through Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, you can't create that which is pleasurable and joyful and essential. But if you try to, something is created. And that something, Yadanichan Tandukkam, is suffering. So the only way that this can stop happening is if you understand this. Dukkhe jnana. Hatamacha also samma ditti. Dukkhe jnana. Understanding through wisdom that this which is being created is actually suffering. Dukkha samudaya jnana. What is the cause of this suffering? Attachment is the cause of this suffering. Attachment, as I said, was extending your arms and pulling those Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara and Vijnana to try and create that which cannot be created. But what's the problem? The dual problem we have here is, although the thing that you're trying to create cannot be created, something gets created, and that something is suffering. So it has to stop. So for that to stop, you've got to stop attachment. You've got to cease attachment. Dukkha nirodhe jnanam. To understand that once you have ceased attachment, suffering is ceased. Dukkha nirodha gaminiya patipadaya jnana. Ayang uchati also samma ditti. The path to eradicating attachment. Can it start anywhere other than the attainment of Sotapanna? It's impossible. There are two things that are impossible in this world. One, the creation of the self. Two, stopping the creation of the self, or trying to create the self without one becoming a Sotapanna. Because until such time, you want to be happy. The matter of the fact is, without understanding this, folks, every single thing you do, no matter how happy you might feel, you're actually suffering. Those who have realized this see that through you. So you might be throwing your hands up in the air and dancing at a party. One who has realized this will look at you and feel sorry for you. You may do all sorts of things to keep yourself happy. One who has realized it will look at you and will empathize with you. They'll sympathize with you. They'll feel sorry for you. You'll have a smile on your face. The smile on their face is a sympathy on your behalf. So don't you be surprised if you come back to the monastery one day and say, Swamin Wahansa, over the last few months, we did listen to the Dhamma, but also we had a good time. Right? We painted our house. Now it's all whitewashed. We changed the furniture. It's all looking nice and spanking new. We got a new car. We also have a new arrival. His name's Tommy. We also went on a holiday. We had a good time. And you come to me with a smile on your face. I'll have some cards with me ready. I'll write on it, my deepest condolences. And I'll pass it over to you. How can you be happy? Even if you are doing a meritorious deed, how can you be happy? What is a meritorious deed? Analyze it. Let's say we are offering flowers to the Buddha and you enjoy that. You enjoy doing that. Now what you're trying to create is a self. You're trying to do the impossible. That's like holding a nail in thin air and trying to hammer it. What's going to happen the moment you let go of the nail, thinking that you've hammered it? You're holding it in thin air. The moment you let it go, thinking to yourself, I've hammered it now, it's going to stay there. The moment you let go of it, it's going to drop on the floor. Is it ever possible that the nail would stay in place if you're holding it in thin air? In your right hand you've got the nail, in your left hand you've got the hammer, now you hammer it, and then now you let go of the nail. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? Well, pull your foot out of the way, otherwise you'll realize what's going to happen. So, if you enjoy merit for the sake of enjoying it, you must begin to understand the problem, folks. A lot of you will have given up on all demeritorious deeds. I am assured of that. But remember, when the Buddha talks about attiyati harayati jigucchati, he talks about all abhisankara, apunyabhisankara, punyabhisankara, aninjabhisankara, all three of them are useless. That is not to say do not engage in merit. What I'm saying is if you are doing merit for the sake of enjoying it, that's meaningless. Do it for the sake of merits. Because you need merits to help you through your path, to help you realize, to help you understand this. The reason you are able to listen to this sermon today is because of your merits. If you fell asleep right after Samanta Chakravalesu, that was the extent of your merits. There's no doer here. It's just cause and effect all over the place. So, the Noble Eightfold Path. Dukkha Nirodha Gaminiyam Patipadaya Jnanam. He understands that, having understood that that which is being created is suffering, how long do you want to live with suffering knowing that it's suffering? How long do you want to live with it? If you know that what you're doing is constantly creating suffering because of ignorance and attachment, how long do you want to be with that? Approximately? Folks, can you see how there is no hope for those who have not listened to the Dhamma? I mean, how can one realize this without listening to the teaching? Throughout samsara, to have sensed the existence of a self and to have held the belief so firmly that this is pleasure, this is good, it's good being me. Isn't that why you still are in samsara? It's good being me, right? It was just a change of outfit, but it was always good being me. If you ask a dog, is it good being you? He'll go, yeah, it's good being me, I just don't like to be a dog. But it's good being me, nevertheless. So like changing outfits, the external appearances, that kept changing. The sights, the sounds, the smells, the taste and touch, and the thoughts that went through the mind, that kept changing. But that frame of reference, that stayed put, and that in itself is suffering. Why? Because yada niccang tan dukkang. Tan dukkang tadanatta. If this is suffering, how can you even talk about a self? How can you talk about something that is pleasurable? Something that is essence-full? How is that sensible? So the fourth noble truth of suffering, or the fourth noble truth of the cessation of the path to cessation of suffering, is the path to eradicating attachment through the eradication of ignorance. When one enters samma ditti, then samma sankappa flows naturally. You don't need to do samma sankappa. It's not something you can do. It happens. You can't get up in the morning one fine day thinking, today I think I'm going to do some samma sankappa. You can't do like that. Samma samadhi is not something you need to do, it's something that happens. Samma vacha, samma kammanta are not things you can do, they are things that happen. Besides, where's the doer to do any of these things anyway? But none of these things can happen until and unless you enter the Noble Eightfold Path. That entering, again, is not something you do. It happens. It happens when you are listening to the Dhamma. When you pay attention, when you set aside distractions, when you keep alert, and you keep your focus. That's when it happens. Not when you're trying to do 100 things at the same time. It can't happen that way. That's why I ask you at the beginning of service, put aside distractions. You must understand, folks, all advice is given free of charge for your benefit. Because you create your own suffering. I don't create your suffering, you don't create my suffering. Suffering is created by ignorance and attachment. The ignorance which lives in my mind creates attachment, creates suffering in my mind. Ignorance which lies in your mind creates attachment, creates suffering in your mind. Do I need to invite you to go back and listen to this sermon? Let me put it this way. If I need to ask you to go back and listen to this sermon, then best you don't. If I have to ask you to listen to this sermon again, then I don't think you should. If you don't need me to tell you to go back and listen to this sermon, then I think you're the kind of person that should go back and listen to this sermon. Yes, it was heavy. Yes, it was subtle. There were lots of points. Things that I didn't understand, I have understood in more detail, with better clarity. So, throughout the next week, do what you need to do. Don't do what I need you to do. Do what you need to do for your salvation. Earn as much merit as you possibly can. Engage yourself in as many meritorious deeds as possible, but don't do it for the sake of the activity. Do it for the sake of merits. Which means you shouldn't be particular about which deed you're doing. If you're picking and choosing between activities, then you're not doing it for the sake of merits. You're doing it because you have an attachment towards one thing versus the other. Again, you're trying to create the self. You're trying to create suffering. Yadanichantan dukkham, all over again. If there are two activities which both generate merit, because again, it's not the activity that generates merit, it's the mindset, it's the intention which generates merit. Intention is not in how you move your arms or your legs or your mouth. It's the intention, it's why you're doing it. If the intention is pure, does it matter what activity you're doing? But if you're particular about which activity you want to be doing, which meritorious deed, let's say you've got an alms giving at the temple, and on the other hand, you have someone else that's decided to do a shramadana, a volunteering activity somewhere else. I'm not talking about which one is more meritorious because of the virtue of the recipient, but simply from your perspective. If merit is all you need, you shouldn't be particular about which activity you engage yourself in. I'm saying leaving aside the fact that one recipient is more virtuous than the other, because on one hand you may have the Mahasangha, on the other hand you might have someone else. I'm saying leaving aside that, you shouldn't be particular about which meritorious deed to engage in. There are 10 of them, any one of the 10. You should feel equally ready to engage in. Otherwise, again, you're creating suffering. That's what you're doing. Anytime you're not letting the Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana pass through the mind, no matter what comes, to let it pass through the mind, you're creating suffering. When you create suffering, no one else around you suffers. You're the only one who suffers. So engage in as much merit as you possibly can, but do it for the sake of merits, not for the sake of what the activity is or anything else. Do it simply for the sake of merits. And as you do work on those merits, resolve, make a determination that may these merits help me to attain my Nibbana, help me to see through the veil of ignorance, help me to realize that being happy cannot happen. Be careful with your lives. After all, that is all you can spend. You can't spend my life. You're spending your life. That is all you can spend. Spend wisely. What you spend is spent. You can't leave a deposit to ask for it later. What is spent is spent. So spend it wisely. Because when it's all said and done, you only have yourself to explain to. Don't worry, on your deathbed, I'm not going to come and ask you why you did this, why you didn't do that. I won't ask you that. Because you'll be far too busy explaining to yourself. Your regretting mind will be asking you for answers, will be holding you accountable. I wish you luck. If you're not careful about how you spend, the only thing that which you can spend, you will have only yourself to be accountable to. You'll have to yourself to answer to. Then that's a tough one. You have all felt guilt at some point in your life, right? Doesn't guilt kill you? Does it not destroy you? That's exactly how you're going to be feeling at the end of this journey, if you haven't done what you should have done. Guilt will kill you. Sometimes it's not the heart attack that's going to kill you, the guilt is going to kill you. It'll be mortifying. I swear to you, this is coming, so watch out and be wise about how you spend it. I won't come and ask you why you did this, why you did that. I only ask that now. Your teachers, your parents, your friends, good friends, the Kalyana Mitras, they'll only ask you now. Why are you wasting your time? Why are you not doing your 15 minutes? Why are you not listening to the sermons? Why are you not practicing? Why not doing your meditation? Why not doing merits? We'll only ask you now. Because once they take you into the courtroom, they won't allow us in. And in that courtroom, you'll just have you and yourself to answer to. We'll just give you a pat on the back and say, good luck, mate. We'll be outside. See you on the other side. So, conduct your days in a way that you will be comfortable with answering to yourself. Kachinako me atta silato nopavadati pabbajite nabinham pachavekkitabban. That's in the Buddha's words. Katam bhutasya me rattin diva viti patantiti pabbajite nabinham pachavekkitabban. That's in the Buddha's words. Spend your days and nights in a way that you will not be ashamed. You will not have to hide from yourself, where you can be accountable to yourself, and you'll be happy with that. You'll be confident in responding to the questions that will come from yourself. Whenever you've done a bad thing and you felt guilty, remember that feeling? That's going to come to you. But then when that guilt comes, there's not going to be any more room for maneuvers or adjustments, because that's the last opportunity you have. Now you have opportunities to change your course of action, to set your bearings right, to readjust. But when it's on your deathbed, you've spent it all. Now you can't make any adjustments. So then that guilt will be so severe, it'll torment you from the inside. You'll be too busy to talk to me then. I've seen this happen to people, folks. That's what I'm telling you. That's why when people get news that it's their last days, someone gets a terminal illness, right? That's why people at that point in time think, oh, I need to go to the temple. All their life they didn't want to do that, but when it's the last few moments, they want to go to the temple. Why do you think that is? That's guilt. The guilt is so powerful that it will get you out of bed, no matter how severe your illness is, no matter how terrible you feel. It'll get you out of bed, it'll dress you up, it'll get you in the car and drive you to the monastery, and it'll get you to come and talk to Swami Mahansa and sit down and listen to him preach for 3 hours at a stretch. Guilt will make you do all that. But why do you wait for guilt to drive you here? I tell you, it's not going to be easy to answer to yourself. And you all experience what I'm saying. Guilt is where you're failing to answer to yourself. That's that uneasy feeling. That's that soul-destroying feeling when you're unable to answer to yourself. That'll kill you. Don't people go and commit suicide when guilt gets too much to handle? See, it's not anybody else. That's guilt. When they feel like they're a failure. I'm telling you, you'll feel these things if you don't pull your act together now. You've got to do what you need to do now. Time's ticking. It's passing by. Don't tell me I didn't tell you so. Okay, let us transfer the merits and bring the sermon to a close. Okay. Let us all take a moment then to transfer the merits that we have all acquired by making offerings to the infinite virtues of the Noble Triple Gem, chanting Pirit, listening to the Dhamma, and engaging in various meritorious deeds that we have conducted today. Let us begin first and foremost by reminding ourselves how incredibly fortunate we are to be in receipt of the Lord Buddha's teaching. With immense gratitude, let us transfer these merits to the bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, upasakas and upasikas who since time immemorial have protected and preserved the sublime teachings of the Buddha and passed it down through the generations of the noble lineage in the form of the Tripitaka, which is thankfully available to us to study, understand and comprehend the Dhamma. Let us also take a moment to transfer the merits we have acquired to all members of the Mahasangha present throughout the world, including the chief prelates of all of the chapters who have dedicated their lives to the noble path and have committed themselves towards the betterment of all sentient beings. Let us not forget that among them are the monks and nuns resident in your local temples and nunneries who have always been by your side through thick and thin. Let us also transfer these merits to Guru Swami Mahansa and all the other monks resident at this monastery, as well as the Anagarikas and Anagarikas attached to the monastery. Let us take a moment to transfer these merits and express our gratitude to those who make great efforts to disseminate the teachings of the Buddha, be that by transliterating these sermons, sharing them out with others, or inviting others to join them. And may through the power of these merits, if any of them have been born today in the woeful plane, redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plane. May through the power of these merits, they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also transfer the merits we have acquired to our devotees, the friends of the monastery, who for the sake of merits continue to sustain the Mahasangha, including everyone among those of you who have contributed to the construction of the monastery, to those who provide the Mahasangha with shelter, alms, robes and medicines, as well as those who have passed on their know-how and extend their well wishes. May through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to our mothers, fathers, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, sons, daughters, grandparents, and various other relations, our elders, friends and acquaintances, employers, employees, and to all those who have helped us, supported us, assisted us in any way, shape or form. By the power of these merits, may they be healed of any physical and mental ailments and overcome any obstacles to their spiritual progress. May they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also not forget to take a moment to transfer messages to the Devas, Brahmas, spirits and demons, primarily the Sakkadeva, as well as all the numerous gods and deities who have committed to protect and fulfill the Sambuddha Shasana. Let us also transfer messages to our guardian deities who keep a watchful eye over us and keep us out of harm's way. And may through the power of these merits they prosper in divine power and wisdom. May they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer messages to our ancestors who have predeceased us, to all who have been our families, friends and acquaintances in this infinitely long journey in samsara. All those who have helped us, supported us, assisted us in any way they could, let us transfer these merits to them. Let us also transfer merits to the members of the armed forces as well as the police force who have sacrificed their lives on numerous occasions to protect the peace and harmony of our nation. May all who have lost their lives in the war, be they friend or foe, rejoice in the merits we have acquired today. Let us transfer merits to all those who have lost their lives in natural calamities such as the tsunamis, earthquakes, landslides, storms, earthquakes, and pandemics and so on, reminding ourselves that among them will be those who have been friends and family to us in this long journey in samsara. Let us take a moment to transfer merits to them. May through the power of these merits, if any of them have been born in woeful plains, redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plane. May they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us finally take a resolve that may through the power of the blessings of all the merits we have acquired throughout the day, we be able to witness the advent of many hundreds of thousands of Arahatun Vahanses and Arahat Mehenin Vahanses on this blessed land and in our very lives itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, may through the power of all the merits we have acquired today, you and I and everyone who has helped make this program a success, in whatever capacity available and possible to them, become an Arahatun Vahanse and Arahat Mehenin Vahanse in this very life and in the era of the Gautama Supreme Buddha itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May the blessings of the Noble Triple Gem be with you all. We will now conclude the sermon.